Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. Welcome to the Digital Forum series. Please do continue grabbing pizza, a beer, anything you need for the next hour or so. It is a real pleasure to welcome you all today. Thank you so much for joining us on a lovely hot day when you could have gone to the pub instead. So I do appreciate that. We are here today to talk about the Digital Centre and to have a little think about some of the themes coming out of the Blueprint for Modern Digital Government. So I am Vicky Brown. I'm a senior partner here at TPXimpact. I'm going to be hosting our two lovely speakers and also inviting you all to kind of feed in, ask some questions and contribute as we go along the way as well. I'd like to introduce the two people next to me, so wonderful women. We have Anise, who is Chief Digital Officer at DBT. So thank you for being with us, Anise. And Eleanor Stevens, who is one of the service owners in the service transformation team at GDS. Did I get all the right words in the right order? Yeah, perfect. I will be handing over in a moment to both of them to introduce kind of themselves and a little bit about their work and what that means. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk about the theme for today and kind of why we're here, really. So as I'm sure many of you know, we're at kind of quite an exciting moment in digital public services. As I'm sure many of you will have seen, the kind of theme of today is to really think about the changes that are going on in delivering digital public services right now and the role of digital in true public sector reform, hopefully, is the grand ambition. For anyone who didn't spot in January, there were a few things published that were really interesting for our sector. So one of them was the State of Digital Government Review, which was a bit of a kind of where are we now, looking back on what has happened. And this one, which is the blueprint, thinking about where should we be going, what are the priorities, and what is real opportunity for change. And personally, I think it's been a really exciting point for us. It's kind of catalysing some real energy and momentum and giving a bit of political mandate that might not have been there for a while in terms of making the change we'd really like to see. Within that, there were a few key areas. I've called out the kind of top 6 priorities there. But in particular today, we're here to have a little bit of a chat about joining up public sector services. So this was kind of priority number 1 that came out of it. Thinking about what do next generation public services look like? How might they be connected truly end to end with a real focus on better supporting businesses as well, which we'll hear a little bit from Anise in a moment. And really just thinking about how might these services change to better serve citizens. So that's what we're going to jump into a bit of discussion. Format of today is that we're going to hear a few minutes from the speakers on their top priorities. We'll go into a few discussion points along those, so thinking about the digital centre and how might that change happen. And then we'll open up to you as the room for questions, contributions, and please do jump in and join us in the chat. What's really exciting about this topic right now is that we're in the very early stages of it. This isn't kind of shared work and finalised. This is a real opportunity and moment to kind of think about what the barriers, obstacles, and opportunities coming up might be. So yeah, that's about today. I will start us off by handing over to Anise to tell us a little bit about her role in DBT and connection to this topic.
Thank you very much, Vicky. So nice to see you all, including many faces from GDS at different points, actually. So I was really keen to come today when Vicky mentioned the topic because it's one that is really close to my heart. It's partly close to my heart because when I first joined government, I was working for the Minister for the Cabinet Office in kind of the first iteration of the digital centre when it was all about hoovering it up into the centre, basically, so that, you know, GDS was in a position to do things for government. At that point, I was in a policy team, and then later on kind of joined GDS when it was in its next iteration of the digital centre, I would call it, working with Ben and Linda on the Common Platforms programme, where I think at that point GDS was kind of saying, okay, we need to be able to work with different departments, so let's build some things here and enable them to do their own thing themselves. So it wasn't about doing everything at the centre anymore, but it was still about building those common components. And then I stayed at GDS through a phase I'm going to call the limbo phase. That I think has lasted a very long time, where I think there was a realization that actually departments were getting more and more capable. So GDS probably had a role in kind of steering that and providing leadership, including across departments. But I think there were like many, many false starts to that. So I was really excited to see the blueprint for modern digital government. I think that actually for once, it was really setting a vision that was kind of bigger than GDS itself, and it was kind of sufficiently specific on the what as well. I was also especially excited because it had business finally recognized as an actual user group alongside citizens, and really commitment to raising the standard of services for businesses to the level that it's at for citizens. So that for me was really exciting, which is why I wanted to join. You've got the clicker. So it has been really exciting. Couple of years in particular, I'd say, for the Department of Business and Trade. I think seeing us move more in that direction, and I'm gonna talk about our relationship with GDS as kind of a multi-phase. So I would say that last year in particular, we were kind of increasingly started to have collaborations that were mostly the result of the relationships that a number of us had. So, how might we use gov.uk chat with business? Because that's a nice user group to start it with. Is app relevant for business? But they were really kind of tactical collaborations. I would say then, the blueprint, I see it as, that real commitment to, to businesses in the UK, but also a commitment to working together in a really different way. I'd say we've kind of established, and we're kind of still figuring out what that partnership looks like. So we've got some MOUs agreed about how we're going to work together for many months and many years on actually trying to make this blueprint happen. But we're probably still in the somewhat tactical space. But we are also collaborating on kind of big spending review ambitions, including bids, in particular in the space of how do we get to a place where GovUK also works for business? Because at the moment, I think that's actually pretty mixed. And also, how do we get to a place where we have a login that also works for business? At the moment, we've got one for citizens, but the business landscape is a bit nuts. So that's that's been really exciting for us to be kind of at the heart of seeing that real commitment from the centre and some of those partnerships starting to happen as well. That said, though, if we go to the next slide, I actually wanted to write, but we're set up to fail. And then I thought, maybe I need to write it slightly differently. But genuinely, I don't think we are at all set up to deliver for success. So how is, I guess, the next half of the chapter. And if we don't answer that, then I think this will flop yet again in terms of, the digital centre being able to really drive cross-departmental transformation. But I don't think it is all on Eleanor and her team. I think we have to figure it out together. I'll highlight some of the challenges we're experiencing briefly. I don't have the answers, which is why I was keen to come here, and I won't talk for too long, but it is kind of a lot around how can we align incentives across departments so that we actually can keep on prioritizing the same problem for a sufficiently long amount of time that we can actually make a difference? And that does involve actually kind of aligning funding. And I think the challenge we have is there are ways for government to do that, and it does it okay. It's always challenging, but you've got, the secretariats, you've got the mission boards now that Keir Starmer's brought in. They're also policy focused. And I don't think any of them really get into delivery in the way that we understand it, let alone digital delivery. So what is there for us to have a way of being held to account to deliver together? I think, that for me is a big question. Kind of ties into accountabilities. We're thinking, okay, if we manage to get this spending review bid together, how are we going to deliver this? Because I don't think there's a single program I can think of that was successful in delivering across borders something that is genuinely transformational. So how are we going to get set up if it requires people in different places to deliver? Those are basically the key points that I'm hoping that some of you might have answers to, if not Eleanor and Vicky.
No pressure. I think if we jump over to Eleanor for a moment as well to chat about what that work in the digital centre is looking like at the moment, and service transformation in particular.
Yeah, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Eleanor. It's really lovely to meet you, and thank you for having me. So just a bit about me, I have been at GDS for about 3.5 years, and I'm now in a role as service owner in the service transformation team, so very focused on services. And I think the things that I've been focusing on recently kind of reflect the wider trend that we've seen as well. So I actually was at a very similar event about a year ago, and I was talking about our work to improve high priority public services, and we were very, very focused on individual services and the transactions that happen within them, and making sure that those are higher quality for users and that they run more efficiently. And that was great. And it was really fun and important work. But what we kept kind of coming up against was this feeling of like, this actually isn't enough. This is not going to materially improve how people experience government. For example, the Apply for a Passport service is a service that we had worked with to and is often referred to as like a really good example of a good service. But it's kind of all very well if you apply for your passport on a Monday and that's great and you have a good experience there. But then on Tuesday, you're like stuck on the phone for hours and you can't get the thing that you desperately need from government. It's about understanding that someone may apply for universal credit in the morning, but in the afternoon, they might be doing something which is also related to being out of work and needing support from government, or trying to reskill, trying to find a new job, having maybe a health issue that makes that more challenging. And actually, what you're doing in the afternoon is still relevant to what you were doing earlier that day, and us as government having a view of that person's whole day or whole life, and seeing that as a more kind of holistic view of what is going on in their life at that time, rather than just a series of unrelated interactions or transactions. So that was the kind of thinking that has fed into the blueprint, and this idea of joining up whole services, making services more personalized, more proactive, and more end to end. So seeing that sort of whole experience rather than just that series of transactions. And so this is really exciting to kind of get to talk about this, because it's something that I've been really passionate about for a long time. But when we published the blueprint, we were sort of able to really get momentum behind it a bit more. And in the blueprint, we have a series of kind of Kickstarter projects where we've kind of taken the ideas or principles in the blueprint and said, okay, well, we're going to start putting those into action with a few kind of Kickstarter projects to test out how this works and create some kind of exemplars or best practice. And so the one that I'm working on is around managing a long-term health condition or disability, and particularly in relation to work, so staying in or finding suitable work. And it's been a really interesting piece of work to get into, and a really brilliant set of services. And we started out looking at the scale of the problem in that space. And I think CDL has spoken about it a little bit in the media recently, about the sheer volume of people that are currently economically inactive because of or with a long-term health condition or a disability, and the really significant rise in that since 2019. So there's an area of massive opportunity, but also massive kind of problem and challenge. So at the moment, if you're in that situation, you're probably interacting with up to or more than 40 different public services across 9 different departments, most of whom don't talk to each other or share information about you or share what support you might need, and about like quite a lot of them are not even available online. And that creates a real problem and creates this really kind of disjointed feeling. And a lot of people that we have spoken to in research sessions have talked about this feeling of being like at the center of a maze, and you're like trying to find the thing that you need and trying to find some support. And you finally kind of get to this one thing that you might need, and then that's great. But then you're kind of back in the maze again, and you're just constantly trying to kind of navigate this process. And so that's the thing that we want to streamline and make simpler for people. The challenge that we have is at the center where we have a great team, but we are not directly responsible for running all of those different services. So it really is a case of kind of convening and creating like a coalition of the willing to really get behind this idea and start to see individual services as the really important interactions that they are, but also as part of someone's wider experience, and start to kind of work together to do things where individual teams may not see the benefit in their own service, but it might be felt way down the line because it's an early intervention or something which then makes changes the kind of outcome much later. So that's a little bit about the work that I've been doing, and yeah, really excited to hear your thoughts and input.
Excellent, thank you. I want to come back to the phrase coalition of the willing, because I think this is a really interesting space and kind of collection of types of people who really buy into that kind of idea that change really happens by people collaborating, looking for routes that might not be the official ones. But let's come back to that in a moment in terms of what are the official and unofficial ways that will happen. I wonder, Anise, in terms of these kind of cross-cutting services, I think Ellen has just described that kind of health example across departments. For businesses, what does that landscape look like right now?
So I guess it's probably somewhat less complicated in theory because there's, I guess, less departments that are involved in business, although actually when you start to add it up, there's business services kind of everywhere. But what we know is that if a business is unsure, we're talking especially small businesses, right? If you're a large business, you can pay somebody who can do all the research and all the connections for you, and you're doing fine. But we're leaving behind the small businesses for who that is quite different. So if you're a small business, we know that if you don't have confidence, you're unlikely to take that step. You're more likely to fold just because you're really unsure about whether you're doing all the things that you need to do. So if we're not in a position to be able to bring everything together, well, those small businesses are just not going to continue to trade, and we're not going to be able to support the economy quite in the same way and drive employment, etc. So we know it's the bigger businesses that will bring, the biggest impact on the economy, but actually the smaller businesses are the one that employ people day in, day out. So for us, it's really important. People don't have to set up as a business, whereas they probably have to do a lot of the citizen services that you're talking about. So we really have to go out of our way to make it easy for them. Otherwise, we'll lose them. So that, I think, is our big focus.
Excellent. And I think there's a big theme in the blueprint as well around, and I'm looking at Flora somewhere here, around inclusion as well. And I know we were chatting about it a bit last week, and I think both those cases that we've talked about there are examples of, by not joining up services, like really increasing the ability that we're likely to exclude people or give unequal opportunities to those who don't have the means to connect those dots themselves, and actually kind of accentuate those differences in people's experience of government. I guess the meat of what we're here to chat about, right, is that this sounds brilliant, and we all know that sounds excellent. We would all love a world in which government services are connected, joined up, personalised, seamless, make total sense. When I update something in one place, it knows that I can have the timely information brought to me in the ways I want to. And I think, a lot of us have been through various iterations, like you were saying, Anise, of public sector service design that has known that is an intent that we could be working towards. But I want to chat a little bit about the barriers to us getting there. So in terms of the kind of ways that we work right now, the systems and structures that we have in place, I think you hinted at a few of them there for us. But what do we think are the obstacles that are in the way to being able to kind of unlock that properly connected end-to-end experience?
I think one of the biggest ones, which has been highlighted to us from people who have worked on this in the past, I think there's a couple. So I think one is the kind of professional separation between digital colleagues and colleagues in other parts of their organizations. So there have been examples that we've come across where there's a really brilliant kind of initiative that's come out of digital, but because it's stayed within digital, it's never really been able to get fully off the ground and become that kind of end-to-end real life thing that it probably should have. And I think that feeds into also the other way, stuff that starts in policy and doesn't include digital early enough then creates more of this kind of siloed issue because the policy has not been designed in such a way that it can be delivered in a cross-cutting whole service kind of way. So I think it's really important that we look to address that. I think also the kind of I don't know, I think it's Conway's law that says an organization will appear on the outside as a reflection of what it's like on the inside. And I think a lot of the structures that we have internally don't make it easy to collaborate across government. And you talked about like, oh, someone knows someone that might be able to help with the gov.uk app. Like I think we've also found that you have to rely on that to kind of find your way around the structures. And one of the things that we found most from the piece of work that we've done on health and disability is that like a lot of the people that we talk to, their biggest request from us is, can you help me with who do I talk to at DWP, or who, like, how do I find out who's who in this system? Can you like set up, do you have like contacts in this place? And actually just finding out who to even like start to work with on this stuff can be really challenging. So I think those are the kind of like cultural challenges. And then there's all of the standard ones that we probably all know about. Like, it's really hard to share data. It's hard from a technical perspective and a legal perspective. A lot of our tech is so old that it's like, there's nothing to even share because you can't get it out. And we need to kind of do some of that, like, not boring, but like less glamorous work to kind of make those systems able to operate in this way. It's not just about what's on the surface. So I think those are my three.
I think the sort of fix the plumbing mentality has been around a while, hasn't it? But for good reason, because we still have very dodgy plumbing. And those structures, I guess, like, I'm curious to see as it plays out, is that going to get enough attention in terms of where like priority and therefore funding and money and support for teams is going to go, compared to sometimes some of those like big shiny products that people like to announce? Because what is, key in all of this, isn't it, is like having something that a minister can stand there and say, here's the thing that I made and I made it and I'm amazing, look at what we've done and that's really changed. Whereas some of that work that you're talking about beneath the hood in terms of like, how do we fix data sharing structures, for example, is hard to sometimes like see the press release angle that would come from it. But I hope we're going to find that looks a bit different. I guess, Anise, do you want to talk about any of those ones that you mentioned there? I think like accountability, and there were a few interesting words on there I'd love to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess thinking about the work we're doing currently at the moment with GDS, but also with some of the other departments, I think we are actually just saying we want to fix the plumbing, and by the way, it's going to cost you a lot of money. But I guess we are kind of telling the story above that around, and if you fix the plumbing, look at this shiny thing that can happen. But I do think, the start of a parliament is quite a unique chance to tell the whole story, because actually you're saying, look, it might take 4 or 5 years. In reality, it probably takes 10 years. But you have kind of got that time ahead of you. I think what's interesting though around kind of the accountability questions. So we are in this unique position at the moment where we came out and said, look, we want to do this really ambitious thing. It's going to cost a lot of money. We got GDS at the table saying, great, let's do it. And suddenly we have HMRC. I was kind of scared to involve HMRC. And then they were like, great, let's do it. And then we just kept going. And everyone's saying, great, let's do it. And then we thought, brilliant. But now we're saying, well, you need to literally get your organization to write a letter that says, yeah, we really believe in this. And then that is turning out to be really difficult. Not because no one wants, everybody genuinely can see how it's great. But if you do this, you don't do something else. So there is something, like you said, to kind of working more hand in hand, which can be really frustrating, because you think, well, I can do this. Like, why do I need you to mark my homework and open a door for me? Mm-hmm. But the reality is we work in a completely policy-driven system.
Absolutely. And I think historically, like if we think about where the barriers have been to that before, what we often find is, or like my experience of working with different teams who have like a set service or a set policy outcome they're aiming to achieve. And often those can be in conflict with other areas of business or other areas of, policy areas that are working closely with those people, but actually trying to achieve a subtly different thing. It's a different number they're being measured upon, and it's a different thing that they are being held to and also funded to achieve. So I think it's a bit of a classic problem in terms of where funding comes for projects and programs and new initiatives versus fixing the existing things and that sort of stuff. Do you feel like there's a bit of a different momentum for change in that area at the moment?
I certainly do, yeah. I mean, I think, having a slightly broken country and a broken government is like a great place to start from. And having a new government that, I don't know what the Prime Minister would say now, but in his speech when he arrived, he did say, a lot of these changes are not going to be 5 years, they're going to be 10 years. And I just think that is quite, rare grounding. I mean, I think the last 5 years, I mean, between Brexit and then COVID, it was just always so short-termist that you couldn't quite achieve some of these things. So we do have a bit of a new starting ground, but can we seize it? Is another question.
I totally agree. I also think from our perspective in GDS, we've moved out of Cabinet Office, which, is important and was seen as kind of the centre and the exciting place to be, and you're really close to lots of ministers, and into DSIT, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. And but the biggest change for us has been having a Secretary of State for Digital. It's been really, really exciting to have someone whose literal job it is to drive that agenda at ministerial level. And I think we haven't had that dedicated person before. So I think that's, shows intent in kind of creating that role, but also really gives us that champion and advocate at that level to drive this forward. So I think that is a slight kind of antidote to the depressing amount of barriers that there are, is that we haven't had that before, and it does feel really exciting to have it this time.
And I think possibly actually for the room, Eleanor, I'm putting you on the spot, but the digital centre is a phrase that we've been using that comes out of the kind of language of this change, but does represent a bit of a shift in terms of how this is structured and who it sits where now. Do you want to just explain that for us, the subtle difference in terms of how the digital centre is coming together?
Yeah, so the digital centre or government digital service is the kind of amalgamation of a couple of different organisations, including GDS, which has existed for a long time, Government Digital Service, and has always kind of built products and platforms that are for reuse across government. So things like gov.uk. I'm sure everyone knows this, but things like gov.uk and One Login, which kind of the building stuff. And then you've also got Central Digital and Data Office, which was the kind of functional leader of the digital data and technology profession across government. So bringing that into the same place as where those common kind of products sit. And the incubator for AI, which is much more kind of pushing the boundaries and testing out new technology and kind of finding those use cases where we can really harness new technology. So that's been really exciting to be part of that kind of coming together of all of these organizations under the umbrella of DSIT, and kind of forming this new digital center as part of that department. And it's been really, I think, you're always a little bit maybe apprehensive about change, but it's been so positive to be kind of surrounded by colleagues that are doing the same stuff and that have a really united kind of mission to make all of these things better, and to kind of the work that I'm doing at the moment, where we're trying to sort of bring the full force of GDS behind this one use case and say, well, what would actually happen if we got teams who are absolute experts in unblocking data sharing issues, and teams that have set the common architecture for future state of government, teams that build and run gov.uk, the team that's running One Login. What would happen if we got all of those people in the same organisation in a room to swarm on this one issue that we think is really important, and is important in itself, but is also setting the approach and the roadmap for how do we do these cross-cutting user journeys in future. So so that's sort of the digital centre, which is genuinely really exciting.
It is, and that sounds like a very motivating place to be when you go, let's pull together the kind of depth of experience and the people who have proven that they can do this stuff. I guess I wonder about the role of the digital centre when it comes to motivating that kind of change elsewhere, and being the kind of enabler of that kind of cross-cutting change we're hoping to see, when they can't be the people who are directly delivering on each one.
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge, especially when you've got people who are managing such critical services and who are balancing the kind of the pressure from the minister to do a shiny thing, pressure from the fact that you're literally running a service that people's like lives depend on and you can't let it break. And then also you've got GDS over here saying, wouldn't it be great if you could be more cross-cutting? Like it is hard to convene that coalition of the willing, and it's hard to do it in a way that respects the things that people are doing, which are really important. So it's definitely something that we're thinking about a lot. And I think we're trying to make sure that we are helping and supporting with things that people already want to do across government. So it's been really great to work with like DBT on the business stuff, and to work with DWP on health and disability, and to kind of lend our expertise rather than trying to sort of direct or dictate.
Yeah, I wanted to come back on the coalition of the willing, because I think that is where the digital centre needs to go further, because it's just not going to be enough to be the coalition of the willing, and no one but the centre of the function can actually change like accountabilities and expectations and funding. And I think we need more than, at the moment, so much of it, you look at commercial function, legal function, they actually report into the centre. Whereas with digital, it's all left to the individual accounting officers. I mean, even on pay, there's so much work going on pay, and yet you still have being able to offer more than any other department, even though it's the same pay frameworks. It's just, I feel like that's actually where, if we're going to actually be able to deliver in a different way, we do need GDS to go beyond advisors, coalition of the willing, convening, to kind of owning some stuff. Like, not for us because we can't do it, but because somebody needs to be able to tell us what to do and when at some point.
And do you think that is in the realm of like standards, assurance, carrot, stick? Like, where do you think, being that very strong centre, what would that actually look like, do you think?
I mean, I think on the Pathfinders, for example, I think they need to be agreed with cabinet, and I think the funding should sit, if it's not with GDS, I think it should sit with one of like a leading department that basically pays other people to deliver in line with what was agreed. So there's a bit more accountability than now. Whereas I think standards are obviously brilliant, but I think they're brilliant at something different. They're not, I don't think they necessarily, like, they enable people to do things in a way that looks more the same, but they don't actually make it one. And I think that just needs that extra step, which I don't think we're going to achieve otherwise, just because we're all pulled in so many different directions.
Yeah, I think the way that we have kind of historically had different levers of accountability and different sort of carrots and sticks at different points does show that it's a really challenging area, and that, as you say, people are balancing lots of different priorities, and sometimes the only way to get what you actually need from a group of people is to mandate it and to make it quite sort of more sticky than carrot. So I think I'd be interested to hear like people's thoughts in the room, to be honest, as well, of like how does that work at different levels. We have, like, for example, service assessments, which are fairly like which are fairly mandated and are quite sort of as a team can be like quite a big kind of pressure, and is often the thing that people see from GDS. That's at a different level to like accounting officer level and CDIO level, and the dotted lines that exist. So I think it's really hard. I don't think I have the answer. And
to stress, we don't expect you to have the answer. That isn't why you're here.
But yeah, it's definitely like, it's really interesting, and it's interesting to think about how do you design an organization that can bring those people together and actually not just have people happy and smiling in a room, but have actual results from it.
Lovely. That feels like a really nice moment to kind of throw open to the room a little bit. I might have one more question for you guys to come back around to, but I think that is such a meaty topic about what the role of the digital centre could be, and how we help remove any of those barriers. I would love to hear if anyone wants to contribute, ask questions, or offer some kind of observations and opinions as well, given we are in such early stages of this conversation.
It was really good. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing everything. I've got too many questions, but I'll try to just ask one now. You spoke quite a lot about how cost-cutting services can cut across multiple government departments, but there's also a lot of dependence on health and the newly formed DHSC and NHS mashup, on ICBs, on local government, especially to deliver a lot of these services. How do you see the strong centre spreading to another layer of the onion out, and I guess helping then central government to change its relationship with the local government?
Yeah, tiny question, James. Thanks.
I think this is so interesting and exciting. So there's a sprint going on in GDS at the moment around how can we work with local authorities. And I think one of the main things that I've seen from that is one, that we need to be a bit more open about what we probably don't know. And I think when you're working at the centre of the centre, it's easy to it's easy to be quite ignorant about what it's like to work in a local authority. And so I think that's kind of the first step, is like understand directly from them, what do they need from us? And also to be open to that might look different for different organizations, is one of the biggest things that we've already started to see. The range of what different local authorities want from the digital centre is quite different. I think it's also about being having an understanding of the sector itself and the role that like procurement and suppliers play in that sector, and the thing that we can bring there in terms of like collective buying power, but also upskilling, and the different levers that we might be able to pull, or the different forms of support that we might be able to provide to help local authorities do that a bit better. But I think we're still at the early stages of working out like what does that help and support look like. But it's definitely like something that we're massively interested in.
I went to Denmark in January, and I know it's a different kind of country and I know it's small, but it kind of made me think about that, because I'm definitely not an expert in terms of local, but I was a bit enlightened as to the fact that I just think they were demonstrating really good leadership in a way that I don't think we do here, thinking about at least the DBT context. When I think about local growth hubs and devolved nations, etc., they basically realize that they are giving money or giving power from the centre, and they were almost thinking about it more like a contract, where they were saying to those organizations, we do this, so you must do other things, but not this, to meet the outcomes, and you must point to us for these things. So there was no duplication of products and services in the same way that we have, at least in the business side of things. And they also said, and this is the infrastructure that we use, and you need to use this infrastructure. So you don't get to go off and build a website. You have to, it's not even a GovUK question. In their case, like you have to use a spin-off. Anyway, I just felt like they were so clear in saying, we all have this shared goal. We play a different role in it, but we're going to give you some parameters. And as long as you respect the parameters, you get your funding and everything's fine. But don't duplicate what we do. Don't get too innovative outside of these barriers. And that just made a lot of sense, because that's just good leadership, isn't it? If you're running a team, that is the way that you need to also be thinking about it. So that just gave me food for thought.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that, because that's really like a franchise model. So I went to talk quite recently with, he was the chief technical officer for McDonald's, and he said that, McDonald's is a franchise. And when he took over, they weren't all using the same tech. They all had to sell the same thing, the same type of food. They have to there's only a little variation on the menu that you're allowed to do. But they weren't using the same tech. And the first thing he did was put in, if you want to be a McDonald's franchisee, you have to use this tech. And that's really what you've just described there, the Denmark thing. And maybe that is really the model that we need from the digital centre ourselves.
Me?
Yeah.
So I work for TPX and I lead a couple of our big contracts, and I've never been judged by a commercial team or by a client on how much I have collaborated with other departments to delivery of a thing. Even though I built like a funding platform, lots of government departments do funding. We were never held to account on that. And there's a procurement act coming through and changes to how suppliers are contracted. I'd love to see in our contract and how we report to our government clients. Are you actually collaborating? Are you driving a collaboration? Because we have contracts with more than one department, and we could absolutely use our role to pull them together. But our clients don't often encourage us to do that. They often don't want us to share something elsewhere because they feels they're shy for them. So I think we can probably push it a little bit from our place too.
I think it's such an interesting point about the use of procurement to kind of achieve certain outcomes. And it was certainly something we talked about a lot. There's a few faces in the room from last week at DCIT. We were at the kind of innovation and conference, and we were having a bit of a similar conversation around could you try and drive innovation through procurement and make that a mandatory part for somebody to kind of demonstrate in the way that you might with social value or something, what you have done through the contract that is innovative. And I think that's one form of kind of ways we could do it. I know last time you were in the building, Ellen, doing a similar thing, we were chatting, weren't we, about kind of standards. And I know we said earlier standards and kind of making things look the same. I think it could go beyond that. I do think there is more value in the standards process, that if we said actually in the same way that we assess a service for, has it used the design system and is it accessible to people to use with technologies, and have we involved users in it? Actually, is it interoperable, and can you describe your data model and who it works with, and can you show how you have understood it as a part of a wider cross-government service? I think that is one of the tools I think that you see start to drive the change in what teams on the ground are doing. And I think there's a bit of a gap here probably that we'll feel over a few years between what we're outlining as the kind of top service picture that we want to change and actually how people delivering the thing that they're working on in any given team start to behave a bit differently. And I do think there is something interesting in standards there. Thomas, I'm not pointing at you now, I'm pointing at the gentleman behind you. Just in case.
This is more local again, and I just wanted to point people to there's a future governance forum document for, which is a really good document. There's a lot of good ideas there. But I was just going to say that I work for Local Gov Drupal. I founded it, and I worked for CLG. And I've been to the future, and it's much better than now. so Local Gov Drupal is a collaboration of 60 councils. So we don't act like 60 organisations, we act like a single organisation. We don't have the money of 60 organisations, sadly, but we get it. And those boundaries have devolved. And I was thinking, when you were talking about the coalition, how do you do that again? How do you make that again? I don't know Theo very well, but I've talked to him through the DCIT conversations recently. And he's got this gardeners analogy. Has he said that? It's we need to be better gardeners. I don't know, maybe he's just done it on the but it's how do we tend the ground to make more organisations and processes and things like that help the coalition willing to do the work. So with my CLG job, we work on open digital planning, so it's similar thing but bigger scale. And we think about software partnerships. This is my idea, this is not an official idea. Yeah.
No, we're up for
but it's what are the means? What's the funding mechanisms that bring people who want to do this together at least in the first instance? And we can do the OD organisation design stuff later, but let's make a process that puts money in the room for the people who want to use it to use it. And I think that's this is too knotty, isn't it, as a problem? There's too much in it, to get your head around. So it's like a knot, how do you unravel it? Is how I think about it, and that's maybe where you start. I don't know.
Very useful, thank you. Linda, you've been very patient. Come on in.
I'm jumping the queue now. I think there's a number of things I wanted to pick up on there, because I was also at an event yesterday, and I think the recommendations for the role of the digital centre in Dublin were all the right categories, but I was really refreshed to see there were bubbles of conditions for making this work. And you see this I've been involved in a number of these iterations of the digital centre and place to local. I think something planning is getting right is that it has aligned all the incentives. So like the policy owning department has the money and has the mandate.
Yeah.
And I think for like all of the big, and of course there's lots of problems with it. There's been lots of money wasted on things that might have been like ultimately shooting at the right outcome. And there's lessons in that where people diverged from like those aligned incentives. But that, I think, is the model to be replicating, especially for their local services. And I felt that it was maybe that those sets of recommendations were a bit bleak on the market shaping and stuff. And yeah, centralizing the money, ownership, civil servants' necks on the line, where policy officials like have the power, is just the only way to shape the markets relevant to the problems that we're talking about. And I mean, for local, it's like adult social care, children's social care, social housing, like technology. And when you fix all that stuff and you start experimenting around new ways or just fixing the data first, then the market will sort itself out and lots of exciting things will happen. And finally, kind of observation or just like, don't like keep reminding everyone to do this, is that everything I've been involved in that has had the coalition of the willing and everything, we're going to finally fix the plumbing, or this is the next moment, falls apart because ministers don't have a clue. And we had a bit of momentum around the local digital program for a while, because we were literally like sitting with our minister every 2 weeks, and we submitted like 2 pages of bullet points on this is what we're doing. Like, we're constantly reinforcing the message and educating him. And I felt that hasn't been happening, things that I've been working on after that. And this is a real opportunity as ministers, and things that I'm hearing as well from various teams in different parts of the system. I don't hear that they're doing that. I think there's still a real culture of like, we give minister what minister asks for, and like, we need to be educating our ministers because that's our job. Like, we know more than them about the mechanisms of doing stuff. And I think it takes a bit of like, I was like, ballsy, go tell your ministers what to think.
Excellent. Does anyone else got any questions for the panel, the room, or just want to jump in? Oh, yeah, Steph, go for it.
So I think this, what's really interesting to me about the topic of digital joining up across government is like, why is it being given to digital? Because the fundamental problem in terms of fixing the plumbing isn't sorting the data out, isn't sorting legacy software out, or problems with that quite solvable. We did a project at TPX looking at why the selling process, and the problem is really shit policy making or really shit legislation making. So I was a bit depressed at least when you said, and I understand why, we have to bend the knee a little bit to policy people to go, okay, well, how do we get this digital thing kind of incorporated? So I guess my question is, what can the digital centre of government do to actually change that balance of power a little? It was always a bit, GDS version 1 was, or had a Trojan horse, Otto say, kind of fixed policy as well. What's the digital centre going to do now to do that?
But no, I agree. It's really important. And I think we see it can be one of the things about being at the centre is you can kind of see the same really frustrating things happening over and over again across government. And there was like this kind of period of like digital like representation on board, like dropping off across the piece. And I think it may be a bit better now, but like it can really damage the whole kind of organization if digital doesn't have a seat at that top table. So I completely agree. And I think that like exco level, the seniority of your kind of your CDIO matters. I think also the NED group matters a lot, having that kind of non-exec voice that understands digital and has that like external experience. So I think that all of those things, although you may not kind of see it in your like everyday day-to-day team working on a service, it impacts how your profession is seen by the wider organization, and then will impact on the service that you provide, because it impacts the decision-making process that fed into it before you even knew that service was going to be the thing you worked on. So I think we really do need to address some of these challenges and kind of redress I get redress the balance, but also like us maybe sometimes get better at operating in a policy environment and support policy colleagues to get better at operating in a digital environment, because I think often it can come from feeling unfamiliar in that kind of world, because it can be so separate.
It can, but like I'm still really intrigued by the fact that we're still referring to them as very different things. We're still talking about digital people working with policy people and like that divide and how do we get better at collaborating. And I think one thing that stuck out from me, like in the language of the blueprint, and obviously language is one thing and how that feels is different, but like it feels like there's a pitch to me there for digital to be the way that we change the policy in ways that people are working together. It's trying to be the enabler and the catalyst to say, like, we're not going to start from what's the policy you're trying to achieve and now let's make a digital product to do that. We're going to say, what does the digital infrastructure need to look like? And then therefore, what kind of intent can it serve and should it serve? Which at least as a language change is refreshing. Obviously the like ways of behaving still feel very different. But like, I hope that at some point the kind of element of like, is there a digital person on at like X job level starts to become redundant, because what we have is teams of leaders who understand digital as the methods of delivery for 21st century government, as opposed to going, there's all the people who do all the governing over there, and then there's a digital person who sometimes makes a website, because that just still, you know, feels archaic in its structure, doesn't it? But I also can't change that on Monday.
That's where we want to get to, but we are where we are now, which is what Anise described. So is there not something element that can be done in the digital centre this is a naive question, I know Anise is talking, but, can't there be something in the digital centre to stipulate where those jobs are and, how many senior civil servants you have in digital, what the structures are in departments? At some point, someone must have said from the centre, I think we should introduce computers into government. So I'm sure it's come from a central, and could you not influence those structures so that they are more uniform?
All I was going to say is I think you already do, and it just isn't working because it's advice. And at the end of the day, the accounting officer role just remains in the department, unlike with commercial and legal. So the recommendations to have representation on a board, maybe they work in some places, but most places it doesn't work. Recommendation to have, people of certain qualities, of certain numbers, it's just not happening.
I was taught that's something stronger than advice. Yes, that's what the point is.
Yeah. I think it's not my area, but I'll just speak on behalf of the whole organisation. I'm sure it's fine. I agree. I think that I think kind of like we were saying earlier, like sometimes recommendations can only go so far. And actually, if you're asking people to change their whole kind of mindset and you're asking people to potentially change how they think about their own like skill set and career, that is really hard, and it's a really big thing to do, and you can't always do it just by being friendly. And I think that's where having the support at ministerial level, my hope would be that enables us to be stronger in kind of not standing up to, but like having that conversation at that level of kind of peer-to-peer, as like, we think that you need to do things differently, and we think that your top team need to look different in terms of their skills and background. So yeah, I would hope that would help.
And make this an opportunity with redundancies.
Ben, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I don't want to be a grumpy old man. I'm allowed to be a grumpy old man. And it's slightly on that question that everyone's been talking about. And Eleanor, you said it's great that there's a Secretary of State who's really enthusiastic about tech, and now DCIT is the place, and that's good. But what we've been hearing about is a deficiency in public sector reform. And my worry that I've had since the announcement was made of moving out of Cabinet Office into DCIT is that it's become the digital people fix this thing. And we, the digital tribe, love that. And it speaks to us. We're like, yes, great enthusiasm for us. But my concern is that it loses that relationship with the fundamental, digital isn't a job that you do, it's a practice that government has. and that we've sort of moved away from that a little bit in this country. And Anita talks about Denmark, and we could talk about lots of other international examples where we were very much a leading example of some of those things. But you know what? The countries that were doing it maybe not so shinily or user-centeredly before we rose to prominence, but were steadily going away at it, learnt from us, and they've applied all of the user-centered stuff and a lot of the really good stuff to their fundamental core public sector reform stuff. And they've carried on this trajectory. And I think we've leveled off a bit. And I just, it's not, is Peter Kyle a good voice around the cabinet? It's how much and how deep does the rest of the cabinet get it? Not, are they enthusiastic about technology, but are they enthusiastic about digitally enabled ways of transforming government?
Can I build on Ben's question? Because it kind of goes to what you were talking about before, which is, why is it always the digital people that are trying to fix these problems? Like, why isn't there a push? I don't get it. Like, why isn't there a push from policy people to say, this is just a bit of rubbish, you can do better? So I've seen you put your hand up.
I'm on the policy side, and I completely agree in that I think the incentive structure is not there for policy people to put their hand up and say, get somebody digital in the room. And working with the policy side, working with DDAT, which is the kind of department by department digital function, is completely siloed. And you ask somebody, I think I want to do a digital discovery to build a service. And they go, oh, I don't know who you should speak to about that. And it takes a year to get off the ground. Because it's not kind of in the way of working for most policy people to think, oh, you know what, I should bring someone in with digital background now, and they should help me in the policy development cycle, because I should have a discovery at the point where I'm doing initial thinking and not kind of as an afterthought.
One of the things that, before there was a DDAP profession, there were exemplars. And like I say, I'm a grumpy old man. Going back to 10 years, right? When a lot of this was beginning and starting to think about how do you do real transformation in the bowels of departments, there was no DDAP profession. And so it relied on bringing the genuinely multidisciplinary team, not a user-centered multidisciplinary team, but a multidisciplinary team of policy, of legal, of all of them around the table. Not to say, if we add more seats around the table and fill them with digital voices, eventually we'll get to a tipping point and now we'll be digital. But how do we make sure that the people collectively who are sat around the table have enough of a handle on it to ask good questions and do the right things? And I've been out of government for 5 years. So, I left in 2018. I'm backing now, but, doing a bit. How much has our emphasis or our investment in DDAT, and even the 6% that was in the last strategy, the 10% that's now viewed there as we have that, if we just have more people around the table, it will all go right. It doesn't feel like what we were trying to do back in the first wave when we did it before, which was to say digital leaders are leaders who understand digital rather than leaders who have digital in their title. And I'm worried a little bit that we're putting all the eggs in a basket that says, if we have a digital person in the room around the table, or maybe we as digital professionals are too possessive of it. Yeah. We're not like, it's fine if you do it and your policy's great, scrappy, rubbish, great, whatever, we'll help you do it better. But ultimately, the way this scales is for 100% of government to understand digital, not to have 10% be digital. I'll shut up now.
I am going to have to wrap us up on this particular moment because we are out of time, and also I can feel that people are wanting to grab another beer and please finish up the pizza. I think there is a whole other conversation, and Anita and I have had it a little bit in terms of policy design type conversations before, about part of the key to progress being putting all of our names and titles and stuff in the bin and going, let's make a thing better. Can I help you do that? I have some tools over here. Let's make a thing better together. And not saying to somebody, why aren't you doing my discovery with the user research in the way that I'm telling you it should be done? But we could talk for another hour on that. So I'm going to park that for a future discussion. Thank you so much for joining us with such interesting contributions. We were really hopeful that it would be as much a discussion as it was kind of questions today, because it's such early thinking. But I will just say, is there anything that either of you would like to end on in terms of optimism and,
bring back the hope. I just, thank you so much. It's been really, really fun. And I think my main reflection on what we were just saying was I think that we have got to the point where digital is most often the thing that exists between a policy and reality. And that if the service thinking is not there to kind of bridge that gap between what's written down and then what actually happens in people's real lives, that's where you get this kind of problem. And I think that space in between policy and reality shouldn't only be filled by digital people. There's amazing operational delivery colleagues that should be absolutely at the heart of that as well. And so I totally agree. It shouldn't just all be digital. And I think there's a balance between having enough of an identity that people feel proud of their skills and proud to be part of a profession, but not to the point that you become exclusive of others and kind of a bit, high horsey about being more user centered than policy people. But yeah, I think it's a hard thing but yeah, really fun to try and make better.
I mean, my only last reflections would be we need to keep, I guess, condensing ourselves in areas where we can have exemplars, right? Because you can get enough of a critical mass that you can show what the future can look like, even if it's a small pocket. But also, I think we all have to have children, because I think it's it's just a multi-generational issue. And I think it will only be sorted with more digital generations coming through the ranks, right? So that's the other thing we all need to do.
That took a turn I did not see coming. Thank you so much both for joining us to talk about things. I think I do want to say particularly thank you for coming at the really early stages of a conversation, because it is quite exposing to come and talk about a thing that is not yet fully a thing, and to be here to kind of provoke the sorts of interesting questions and topics that we're having here. So thank you very much. Everybody else, thank you for being here. Oh yeah, give them a clap, please. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Please do hang around, have another beer with us. I feel like there's about 30 conversations that we could continue to have in the room. So do hang around and have them and help us get through that pizza mountain. If you want to join us for more conversations like this in the future, our digital forums, this event is a series. So you can find a link to that here. We'll have lots more on these kind of themes in future. So I think in particular around that kind of central to local connection, that's something that we've got a lot to think about and say here as well. So scan this and stay in touch. And thank you very much.